exterior. Aircraft lighting for the Dash 8 Q400 falls into three basic categories: interior lighting, exterior lighting, and emergency lighting. Interior lighting consists of lighting for the following areas: the flight compartment, the passenger compartment, the baggage compartments, and the service areas. And recognition. Exterior light consists of landing lights, approach lights, flare lights, taxi lights, position lights, anti-collision and recognition lights, engine and wing inspection lights, and the logo lights. Emergency lighting is provided for the following areas: ceiling lights, reflective floor markings, location signs, exit signs, and exterior egress lights for each passenger exit. Flight deck lights are installed to provide the flight crew adequate illumination of the instrument panel and flight controls to ensure safe operation of the aircraft. The flight deck lights function independently, and certain critical areas have overlapping lights so that a single light failure will not adversely affect the operation of the aircraft. The flight compartment lights are grouped into 6 zones. These zones are the overhead console, the glare shield, the forward center console, the aft center console, the pilot's flight panel, and the co-pilot flight panel. In addition, the circuit breaker panels incorporate lights. The illuminated circuit breaker panels are the left and right circuit breaker panels, the avionics circuit breaker panel, and the 115 variable frequency AC circuit breaker panel. The aft section of the flight compartment is illuminated by the dome lights and the observer utility light. The flight compartment lights are controlled by the overhead lighting panel switches and the side console switches. Some lights are controlled by an adjacent switch. There is one power supply for each of the 6 light zones that convert 28 volts DC aircraft power to 5 volts DC power for the lighting system. The power supplies are labeled PS1 through PS6. They are located behind the wardrobe and are electrically protected by 11 circuit breakers installed on the emergency light's 5 volts DC lighting panel. The 28 volts DC power from the aircraft distribution system is reduced to 5 volts DC by the power supply. The power supply has a dimmer to adjust the power from 0 to 5.7 volts DC. The brightness of the lighting can be adjusted from full brightness to completely off by turning the dimmer knob fully counterclockwise. Small 1 amp 5 volt lamp assemblies are installed inside the plexiglass facing of each panel to illuminate the panel markings. A plus symbol on the face of the panels indicates the position of the lamp's electrical connector on the back of the panel. The switches that control illumination of the 6 lighting zones are located on the overhead panel on the right side below the fire protection panel. 4 dimmer switches control the lighting for the overhead console, the glare shield or eyebrow panel, and the forward and aft sections of the center pedestal. The switches that control illumination of the 6 lighting zones are located on the overhead panel on the right side below the fire protection panel. 4 dimmer switches control the lighting for the overhead console, the glare shield or eyebrow panel, and the forward and aft sections of the center pedestal. 2 dimmer switches. The other 2 dimmer switches are found on the pilot and co-pilot side consoles. These switches control the illumination of the indicators and controls on the pilot's and co-pilot's flight panels. Flight panel lighting. The pilot's flight panel lighting illuminates the pilot's index control panel and the pilot's side panel. The integrated standby instrument lighting intensity level is controlled by the buttons labeled plus or minus located on the left side of the instrument. The pilot's instrument panel and side console light power is supplied through the 5 amp panel lights and is labeled Pilot Flight Circuit Breaker. It is located on the 28 volts DC left main bus. The 5 volts DC lighting circuit is protected by circuit breaker C3. The co-pilot's dimmer knob is located on the co-pilot side panel and is labeled Co-pilot's Flight Panel. The co-pilot flight panel lighting illuminates the co-pilot side panel and the co-pilot index panel as well as the landing gear and GPWS hydraulic control panels. The glare shield panel lights are controlled by the glare shield dimmer knob located on the panel lighting section of the overhead console. The glare shield lighting illuminates the flight guidance control panel and the pilot's and co-pilot's clocks. Circuit breaker panel lights enables the flight crew to view the circuit breakers under all ambient light conditions. A light installed on the pilot's side of the flight compartment bulkhead illuminates the avionics circuit breaker panel. The left DC circuit breaker panel is illuminated by a light installed above the pilot's side window. A light on the co-pilot's side of the flight deck bulkhead illuminates the 115 volts AC circuit breaker panel. The right DC circuit breaker panel is illuminated by a light installed above the co-pilot's side window. The circuit breaker panels are powered by 28 volts DC. Circuit breaker panel lighting is controlled by a two-position circuit breaker panel lighting switch on the pilot's and co-pilot's side consoles. The co-pilot's instrument panel and side console lights are powered through the 5-amp panel lights and is labeled Co-Pilot Flight Circuit Breaker. It is located at Q3 on the 28 volts DC right main bus. The 5 volts DC lighting circuit is protected by circuit breaker C9. The two dome lights provide illumination in the flight compartment to supplement the panel and instrument lights. The dome lights are located in the ceiling above the pilot and co-pilot. The dome lights provide emergency lighting if there is a failure of flight compartment lighting. The controls for the dome lights are the storm off, storm dome, or dome switch on the panel lighting control panel of the overhead console. When you select the storm dome position, the storm lights supply additional lighting for the pilot and co-pilot. These lights are located under the glare shield and in the glare shield to side console fairing. The storm lights are intended as a precaution against momentary blindness resulting from a lightning flash. When the storm dome position is selected, the dome lights are powered through the 5-amp flight compartment dome lights circuit breaker. Power comes from the 28 volts DC left secondary bus. When the dome position is selected, the lights are powered through the 5-amp flight compartment dome lights circuit breaker. In this case, the dome lights are powered directly from the battery power bus. If both switches are selected, power is supplied from the 28 volts DC left secondary bus only. This isolates the two sources of power from each other. There are two map lights in the flight compartment. One light is for the pilot, and the other is for the co-pilot. The map lights are located below the pilot's and co-pilot's side windows. The map lights are directionally adjustable in a fixed mounting to spotlight each map table. The map lights each have an individual dimmer switch control knob identified as map light dimmer located adjacent to the map light. These dimmer switches can adjust from off in the counterclockwise position to full bright in the full clockwise position. Power to the pilot's map light is supplied by 28 volts DC left main bus power through the 5-amp D3 pilot map lights circuit breaker. Power to the co-pilot's map light is supplied by 28 volts DC right main bus power through the P3 co-pilot map lights circuit breaker. 3 utility lights are available in the flight deck, one for the pilot, the co-pilot, and the observer. The utility lights are reading lights located in the ceiling directly over the flight crew members' seats. The pilot's and co-pilot's utility lights use an adjacent dimmer control knob labeled Flight Compartment. Rotating the control knob fully counterclockwise turns the lights off, and fully clockwise is fully bright. The observer's utility light also has a dimmable control knob. Power to the pilot's utility light is supplied by 28 volts DC left main bus power through the 5-amp pilot map lights circuit breaker. Power for the co-pilot's utility light is supplied by 28 volts DC right main bus power through the co-pilot map lights circuit breaker. Power to the observer's reading light is supplied by 28 volts DC left secondary bus power through the 5-amp flight compartment dome lights circuit breaker. There are 2 ice detection lights located on the top outboard ends of the glare shield panel shroud. The ice detector lights illuminate the ice detection posts mounted on the windshield wiper arms. Power to the pilot's and co-pilot's ice detection switches is supplied by the left and right 28 volts DC essential bus through the associated 5-amp storm pilot circuit breaker panel lights and co-pilot circuit breaker panel lights circuit breakers. The lights are controlled by the windshield wiper ice detection light momentary on push button switches located on the pilot's and co-pilot's side consoles. Selecting these switches to the on position illuminates a stand-off post located on each windshield wiper blade arm. The light reflects off the post and the crew can check for the presence of ice. Passenger compartment lights consist of lights for the boarding area, cabin ceiling and sidewall lights, individual seat reading lights, lavatory lights, and galley lights. In addition, the interior lighting includes passenger information signs. The passenger compartment lighting controls are membrane-type switches located on the forward flight attendant control panel on the overhead bin end cap. The boarding lights consist of the threshold and ceiling panel lights. The lower threshold boarding light is located just above floor level on the forward side of the air stair door entrance. It illuminates the floor area in the top step of the air stair door. The forward boarding light is located in the ceiling aft of the flight compartment entry door. It illuminates the area between the air stair and the flight compartment door. The air stair door has 4 lights. Each stair riser has a light installed in the top center of the riser to illuminate the stair tread below it. The air stair lights are powered by the left main DC bus through the exterior lights air stair circuit breaker located on the left DC circuit breaker panel. The threshold and ceiling panel lights are powered by the battery bus through the boarding lights circuit breaker on the right DC circuit breaker panel. On the forward flight attendant panel is a membrane touchpad switch that controls the boarding lights. The switch identified as boarding controls the boarding lights. The boarding light switch has a red LED that illuminates when the boarding light switch is on. A switch on the membrane touchpad located on the forward flight attendant's panel controls the air stair lights. The switch labeled air stair, when selected, contains a red LED indicator light that illuminates when the air stair lights are on. Passenger compartment lighting is accomplished with 21 fluorescent lights installed in the ceiling. Each lighting unit has a ballast inverter that supplies each light fixture with 1 fluorescent light tube. 10 lights are located on the right side of the passenger compartment, and 11 are located on the left side. The membrane touchpad switch at the forward flight attendant panel controls the cabin ceiling lights. When the cabin overhead switch is selected on, the red LED indicator light on the switch illuminates. When the cabin overhead switch is in the on position, 28 volts DC is supplied to the 2 groups of ballast inverters. The left side ceiling lights are powered through the 20 amp cabin lights power 1 circuit breaker on the 28 volts DC right main bus circuit breaker panel. The right side ceiling lights are powered through the 20 amp cabin lights power 2 circuit breaker on the 28 volts DC right main bus circuit breaker panel. The control of the ceiling lights is supplied through the 5 amp cabin lights control circuit breaker R2 on the 28 volts DC right main bus circuit breaker panel. The cabin sidewall lighting is provided by light fixtures located between the overhead bins and the cabin sidewall. The lighting is designed to illuminate the window and sidewall area with indirect lighting. The cabin sidewall light controls are found on the membrane touchpad located at the forward flight attendant control panel. The switch labeled cabin sidewall contains a red LED indicator that illuminates when the switch is selected on. When the cabin sidewall switch is in the on position, 28 volts DC to the lights is supplied to the sidewall light units. The left side cabin sidewall lights are powered through the 20 amp cabin sidewall lights power 1 circuit breaker on the 28 volts DC left secondary bus circuit breaker panel. The right side sidewall lights are powered through the 20 amp cabin sidewall lights power 2 circuit breaker on the 28 volts DC right secondary bus circuit breaker panel. The control of the cabin sidewall lights is supplied through the 5 amp cabin sidewall lights control circuit breaker on the 28 volts DC left secondary bus circuit breaker panel. Reading lights are provided to illuminate the area around each individual passenger seat, as well as the flight attendant stations. The reading lights are located above each passenger seat in the passenger service unit, or PSU. The PSU on-off membrane touchpad switch on the forward flight attendant panel controls the reading lights. When the switch is selected to the off position, the reading lights are inoperative. When the switch is selected to the on position, each reading light is controlled by its individual switch on the PSU. A red LED indicator light in the PSU on-off switch comes on when the switch is selected on. Illuminated information signs advise passengers of exit locations, lavatory availability, and pilot and flight attendant instructions. The information signs are located in the PSUs and other locations throughout the cabin. The PSUs in the passenger compartment have no smoking and fasten seatbelt lights and a loudspeaker. The signs and symbols are only visible when lit. There is a PSU in the lavatory with a flight attendant call switch and a return to seat sign. The PSUs in the passenger compartment have lighted no smoking and fasten seatbelt symbols and a loudspeaker. Again, the signs and symbols are only visible when lit. The PSU on-off switch on the forward flight attendant panel controls the operation of these symbols and information signs. When the PSU on-off switch is selected to off, the lighted signs and symbols on the PSUs are inoperative. When the switch is in the on position, 28 volts DC power is supplied to the PSUs. The circuits for the PSU symbols and signs are powered through the 7.5 amp passenger warning signs circuit breaker on the left essential bus circuit breaker panel. Several lighted combination signs are found at various locations in the aircraft. One is located in the ceiling above the center aisle at the forward flight attendant's seat. 2 mid-cabin signs are located in the ceiling above the center aisle at mid-cabin. There's also one sign forward of the wing and one aft. Another combination sign is located in the ceiling over the doorway between the cabin and the galley. The forward combination sign combines the exit sign, the no smoking sign, the fasten seatbelts sign, and a lavatory occupied sign, and is bilingual in English and French. The forward combination sign in the mid-cabin center aisle contains no smoking and fasten seatbelts signs. The aft mid-cabin sign has only a lavatory occupied sign. The combination sign on the galley ceiling just aft of the aft cabin combination sign contains no smoking, fasten seatbelts, and an exit sign. The lighted passenger information signs are controlled from the passenger warning switches on the lower right side of the overhead console. The no smoking switch turns the no smoking signs and symbols on and off. The fasten seatbelt switch turns on the fasten seatbelt signs in the passenger compartment and the return to seat sign in the lavatory. The no smoking signs also come on when the landing gear is selected to the down position. Power for the fasten seatbelt and no smoking signs and symbols is supplied through the 7.5 amp passenger warning signs circuit breaker on the left essential bus circuit breaker panel. The wardrobe light is located on the roof of the wardrobe. A micro switch controls the light, so when the door opens, the light is on, and closing the door turns the light off. Power for the wardrobe light is supplied via the wardrobe and baggage light circuit breaker on the left essential DC bus. Dimmable fluorescent lights illuminate the lavatory. The lavatory switch is located on the forward flight attendant panel, and a door latch micro switch controls the operation of the lavatory lights. When the door is latched closed, the micro switch provides full illumination, and when the door is unlocked, the lights are on dim illumination. A red LED indicator light illuminates when the lavatory lights are selected on. The galley light illuminates the countertop work area. 2 fluorescent lights are located in the ceiling over the galley. The fluorescent lights are dimmable and are controlled by switches located at the top of the galley. The forward and aft baggage compartment lights automatically illuminate when the baggage doors are unlocked. One dome light is located in the forward baggage compartment, and a micro switch in the door mechanism controls the lights. The aft baggage compartment has 2 lights controlled by the door mechanism. When the baggage door is opened, the aft baggage compartment lights illuminate. When the door to the refuel panel is opened on the right engine nacelle, the panel light automatically illuminates. A 28 volts DC power source powers the light. The aircraft is equipped with exterior lighting to provide illumination for the flight crew and to aid in aircraft identification. Exterior lights consist of landing and taxi lights, position lights, anti-collision lights, inspection lights, and logo lights. The landing lights include an approach light and a flare light located outboard of the engine nacelles on the leading edge of each wing. The outboard approach lights are aimed forward with a 1.3 degree toe-in a horizontal plane to illuminate the runway during an approach. The inboard flare landing lights are aimed directly forward at a 4-degree angle downward to provide runway illumination when the airplane is in a pitch-up attitude during the landing flare. The flare lights are powered from the left main bus and right secondary bus through 25 amp circuit breakers labeled exterior lights left flare and exterior lights right flare respectively. The approach lights are powered from the left secondary bus and right main bus through 25 amp circuit breakers labeled exterior lights approach left power and exterior lights approach right power, respectively. The landing lights are controlled by switches located on the exterior lights section of the overhead panel. There are two separate switches labeled flare and approach. The aircraft uses a single 250-watt taxi light located on the nose landing gear strut. The taxi light only illuminates when the landing gear is down and lot, and the taxi light switch is set to taxi. The taxi light is controlled by the taxi switch located on the overhead console exterior lights panel. When the switch is moved to the taxi position, a control relay is activated. The relay is controlled by the proximity sensor electronic unit to allow the taxi lights to illuminate only when the nose gear is down and lot. The left main bus supplies power to the taxi light through a 10 amp circuit breaker labeled taxi power. The left main bus also supplies power to the taxi light control switch through a 5 amp circuit breaker labeled taxi control. The position lights consist of a dual red and green wingtip position lights and a dual whitetail position light. The lights show the direction of the flight and the orientation of the aircraft. All three position lights are powered from the 28 volts DC right essential bus through a common circuit breaker. The position lights have primary and secondary bulbs, so the lights automatically switch to the secondary bulb if the primary bulb fails. The position lights are controlled by the position on-off switch located on the exterior lights panel of the overhead console. The position light switch controls the position lights on the wingtips and the tail. The switch module controls the automatic switching to the secondary light if the primary light fails. When the switch is initially set to position, all lights illuminate. After 0.7 seconds, the secondary lights extinguish. When the switch module senses reduced current from a primary bulb failure, the secondary bulb is automatically switched on. The inspection lights allow the flight crew to visually inspect the engine intakes and wing leading edges to detect any ice formation. An engine inspection light is located on each side of the fuselage. A wing inspection light is located on the outboard side of the engine nacelle. The inspection lights are controlled by a switch located on the exterior lights panel of the overhead console. The switch is labeled Wing Inspection and controls the wing and engine inspection lights. The wing inspection lights are located on the outboard side of the engine nacelles. When illuminated, these lights enable the flight or ground crew personnel to inspect the leading edges of the wing for ice formation. The engine inspection lights are located on either side of the center fuselage. The engine inspection lights enable flight or ground crew personnel to visually inspect the engine intakes, propeller spinner, or inboard wing leading edges for ice formation. There are two anti-collision lights that increase the visibility of the aircraft in flight and on the ground. The upper white anti-collision light is located on top of the vertical stabilizer. The lower white anti-collision light is located on the lower center line of the fuselage. The red recognition light is located on the upper forward fuselage. When the aircraft is on the ground, the recognition light illuminates to warn that the engines are operating or are about to start. The recognition light has one element. The white anti-collision lights have two elements. You select the secondary element by moving a toggle switch located in the aft fuselage equipment bay when the primary element fails. A separate toggle switch is available for the upper and lower anti-collision lights. Unlike the position lights, selecting the secondary light source is done manually, not automatically. The anti-collision lights are controlled with the 3-position toggle switch with the positions red, off, and white anti-collision. The switch is located on the overhead console on the exterior lights panel. You can select either the red recognition light on or white anti-collision for the anti-collision lighting. When off is selected, all anti-collision lights are extinguished. Two logo lights are installed on the underside of the horizontal stabilizer. One logo light is located on the lower right and lower left side of the horizontal stabilizer to illuminate the airline logo on the vertical tail and increase visibility at night. The logo lights are controlled by a 2-position switch located on the exterior lights panel of the overhead console in the flight deck. The switch is labeled Logo Light and is located on the lower right side. The emergency light system provides interior and exterior lighting to aid in the evacuation of the aircraft. If the DC electrical power system fails, the emergency lighting system provides battery-powered passenger compartment lighting. The emergency lighting system consists of the emergency cabin lights, the emergency light power supply unit, the emergency egress lights, and the emergency floor path lights. All emergency lighting is powered by four 6.4-volt NiCad batteries that comprise the emergency power supplies. The four batteries are located above the passenger compartment ceiling near each emergency exit. Isolation diodes do not permit the batteries to discharge into the aircraft buses. The emergency power supply units are charged by the 28-volt DC left essential bus when power is available to the 28-volt DC left main bus. The emergency light switch is in either the arm or off position, and the cabin handset fairing switch is set to normal. Four egress lights are available. One is located at each emergency exit to provide exterior emergency lighting. Emergency exit identifier signs are located at each of the four emergency exits. Emergency exit locator signs are located near each of the four emergency exits. The forward passenger door egress light and exit sign are powered by a battery power supply. The right forward emergency exit egress light and exit signs are powered by a separate battery power supply. The egress lights and exit signs for the two aft exits are powered by the same battery power supply. The emergency ceiling lights in the passenger compartment provide interior lighting for the passenger aisle. The ceiling lights are powered by three of the four battery power supplies. There are 7 lights on the passenger compartment ceiling over the center aisle to provide emergency lighting. The emergency lights and exit signs are controlled by a switch labeled Emergency Lights Off Arm On located on the emergency lights control panel in the flight deck. The switch labeled Normal On the cabin handset fairing also controls the emergency lights. Setting the emergency lights on-off arm-on switch in the flight deck to on turns the emergency lighting on. If the switch is set to the arm position, the lights illuminate if there is a 28-volt DC left main bus failure. The off position turns the lights off. When the normal on switch on the cabin handset fairing is set to on, the emergency lights come on regardless of the position of the flight deck emergency light switch. When the switch is set to normal, the emergency lights extinguish and only illuminate if there is a 28-volt DC left bus failure and the emergency light switch is set to the arm position. If the emergency lights come on by the automatic function, they are turned off by setting the emergency light switch to the on and then the off position. An emergency light's disarmed caution light appears on the caution and warning light panel if the emergency light switch is not in the arm position. A photoluminescent emergency exit path lighting system is installed along both sides of the passenger aisle to the emergency exits to provide evacuation guidance. Lighted strips extend from the air stair door to the last seat in the rear of the aircraft on both sides of the aisle. The photoluminescent strips partially extend into the forward emergency exits module.